Good evening. Pull up a chair. I've seen so many of your faces and so many smoke rings it's been blown with Uncle Billy. They asked me to tell you about how all this got started. About this lady here. Well, I guess I best start at the beginning. In the fall of '62, a feller by the name of Virgil Q. Wax. I don't know if any of y'all remember Virgil Q. or not. He had a show, it was called Virgil Q. Wax Varieties. He filmed everything from Bluefield to down past Middlesboro. Carried around a little Super 8 camera, filming everything. Oh, here we are at Ed's service station. Ed just got a new gas pump. I want you to look how black that hose is. Everybody made fun of him, but they watched it. And his works are archived over at East Tennessee State University. He ran into my dad, Pappy, that fall. He said, Jack, there's a bunch of folks down there in Kentucky that's wanting to do an outdoor drama about that book that Fox feller down here in Big Stone wrote. He said, that needs to be done here in Big Stone. Later on, first weekend of December in '62, I had a flower show in the old Big Stone Gap gym. This lady, Clara Louise Kelly, Miss Kelly to some, Honey to grandchildren, Great White Mama to the rest of us. She had organized that, formed 3 other flower shows besides Dogwood. She had me and Pappy go down and cut cedar trees, fill it. It was a pretty good show. That whole gym was full of flower arrangements. She was so proud of herself. Oh, I've got to find something to sink my teeth into. And I can feel it today. My mother punching Pappy in the ribs. Tell her. Told her about what Virgil Q had said. Well, you see that Miss Kelly had already won her fame in Big Stone. She married this Kelly feller, Creed Kelly. Now, he had found her in that cultural metropolis of Knoxville and brought her up here. Her dad, or his dad rather, had the pharmacy down there at what's now Miners Park. If you ever remember that old mosaic there, it said drugs. That was Kelly Drug. When Miss Kelly came to town, she was absolutely appalled. For the people had all these fenced-in yards, and they were behind the fences while the cows roamed the streets. This isn't right. The cattle have got to be behind the streets or behind the fences. She took it upon herself to clear the cattle from it, for it was written up in magazines that it was the only cow pasture in the world with a traffic light, for people had to stop more often for the cows laying down in the middle of the road than they did the traffic light. Took her 3 years, and it did not bode well with the newlyweds, for the pharmacist father-in-law was owner of one of the said cows. She did it. Took her 3 years, but she got the cows off the street. After Pappy told her about Virgil Q, it was New Year's Day, '63. Pappy, my uncle, and I went into the Tolliver house for the first time. It was in sad shape. There were built-in cabinets in the basement. It was all blocked off in apartments, and the apartment dwellers had chopped up the cabinets for kindling for the fireplaces. Mr. C.M. Dixon had the laundry next door, owned the place, and he was getting ready to turn it into a machine shop. Well, come back to Miss Kelly. We knew that she could get something done. She pulled together the people of the town. People like Dean Graybill was head of the Old Dominion Power. Ben Allen with the Phillips 66 oil. Bill Botts, pharmacist, what's now Kirkland's. And especially Glessie Martin. Now, Glessie Martin was the postmistress, and she had an apartment house over here called the Terrain. And she was a very close friend of John Fox's sisters. Needed their approval of this. There was a multitude of people. Brownie Polly Sr. They organized and became incorporated in April of '63. And to garner the permission of John Fox's sister, they practically had to sign an affidavit saying it would stay strictly by the book, for they had been burned 3 times already. For the book had been created into a movie twice during the silent era, and the last time was 1937. First movie made into Technicolor. First starring role for Henry Fonda. Fred McMurray was in it. But it had nothing resembling the story that John had written. They were adamant that it stay true to his words. Later on that summer, contacted this feller down at LMU, Earl Hobson Smith, English teacher. Now, how he was selected, I know not. I don't remember that. But he adapted it from book to play form. And Paxton has a picture of Miss Kelly standing in this area reading the script. And it was so adamant that they should stay exactly by the script that over here sat Phyllis Holden, Nancy Belton sat over here for the first 2 years, turning a page at a time to say that it stayed exactly by the script. That was the law. She administered said law, pulled it all together. You can't imagine what this was like. It went from a garden to a performance in 30 days. 30 days, people. Quisenberry's sent his whole crew down here, built a stage and the backdrop. I think they spent 10 days doing that. Now, nothing is like it was then to that extent. Had a path that came out, went around the end of the stage, wasn't any deck. An outhouse right there at the corner of the tunnel. That was Reverend Asbury's. Had lived in what's now the little schoolhouse over here. And if you notice that big stump back there, that thing's been cut, I'd say about 15 years. But the year we started, it wasn't 3 inches in diameter. Pardon me. Well, Preacher Asbury, I don't know that he ever was a preacher, but he was so called. He had a little stoop out there and he sat there in his rocking chair every night. Every night. Now, I need some help on this little bit right here. I know how to get bad roof. Bait him with a woman. Amen. Amen. He had bellered that out every night. Every night. Went on for years. And it became so much a part of it when he passed on. There was a void. Void. They compensated him. I think they paid him $20 for the use of his garden or what he didn't get out of it. Why, we went all over everywhere trying to find chairs. Went over to Earl Theater. All those chairs bolted together similar to these, but they wasn't attached. Came in here after Adam set up and it looked like dominoes. They'd blowed over. Went to every church we could, gathered up chairs. I even rode over to Gate City with Worley and Otto Reed, the Reed brothers. I was afraid to sit in that front seat, and I rode in the back of that one-ton truck. Like froze death coming back. The rain, they didn't stop for me. But we had gotten chairs from the armory. Ran out everybody we could, and finally, now keep in mind, there wasn't anything back there all the way to the sidewalk. We had boards stretched across pop bottle crates. Down here was the orchestra pit. Jack Gibbs down there with that little electric baton that he had. Looked like a lightning bug on a string. All of this was wood, and the stage ended about right here. Wasn't any mics that first year. And the lights were on two pipes, piece of plywood with floodlights. And Ned Dress had rigged up a thing out there in that second-story window, that bedroom, and took an old rheostat dimmer, motor control, out of the mines, and that was what adjusted the lights. We had to run from one side of the stage on the dirt around the back to the other side to get over here, back and forth. Wasn't any good light back there, and trip over everything coming and going, tree roots and everything else. Did 9 shows. First season, see if this thing would work. It was a crystal moment in time when everything came together. Sometimes they call it critical mass. We'd had a wonderful music club. Lynn, Letha's dad, Tommy, they did King and I, Oklahoma. I can't remember, Fiddler on the Roof. And it was usually Tommy Masters and Barbara that did the lead roles. What beautiful voices. That was going on. And every civic organization, the Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, they went around selling tickets throughout town. All the churches participated in one way or another. Miss Kelly getting all this pulled together. And there was another lady. She was always Miss Kelly's helping hand. Ruth Slimp. We all called her Sarge, for she was just like a sergeant. And she had a concession stand behind that board fence over there. It was on the front porch of a house that's long since gone away. For the restrooms, we used the bus terminal. They kept the doors open late that night for us to do it. Believe it or not, it filled it. Filled this place. I've said it so many times, I was with giants. Maybe not physically, such giants. Character-wise, they were. So many people have asked me about Jim Hawkins. I was 14-year-old. That man scared the hell out of me. He was as mild a person as you could possibly imagine. But he'd go off by himself and go into a trance for 15, 20 minutes. Susie and I were talking. He scared us. He had to give it up. It was affecting him emotionally because when we'd come out and greet the audience, the kids were so terrified of him. And it would make up. Somebody was talking about this today. And real life, and I'll get to that in a minute, about the real characters. It was said about Doc Taylor that one half of his face is an angel's and one half is the devil's. Jim was always made up that way. If he was talking to Jack Hale, he had turned where it was angelic. If it was anybody else, he turned it as the devil. Barbara, she made you. That voice of hers, she could have gone professional. But she encountered this fellow by the name of Brownie Polly, and he brought her to Big Stone. I often told him, it's the greatest thing he ever did. Bring her home with him. Tommy Masters, Devil Judd, whoa. He will always be the Devil Judd to me. And that singing voice, after we had such critical prompters, he kind of laxed up. You never knew what was coming out of his mouth. And I was telling him a while ago, one night he was up here singing in the homecoming, and a grampus got after him. Now, if y'all don't know what a grampus is, put about 3-inch long pinchers on a hummingbird, and you got one. He said that thing was right in my face, and it was going like it. He tried to keep a straight face singing. He couldn't. He lost it. Then we had Hoss Slim, Cletus, long white beard, picture paintings up here in the house. Many times he'd come in here and he had been grievously overserved down at the Liberty Cafe. But he was the sheriff. Not the first year, but later on, Floyd Sloan became Bad Ruth. He was about 6'6". And I was playing Willie. I swear that hand was about that long. He'd swart me across the stage and I'd land about 15, 20 feet away from him. Another gentle soul. So many people, I know I'm going to leave people out, but you all have memories of these different ones. The ones that shaped your lives. I don't care if it's a 2-year-old, he better mind his manners because there's a toddler watching him younger than him, mimicking everything he does. That goes through you out your life. Or somebody watching you. You may never know them. It's the reason we need to mind our P's and Q's. She could sure straighten out P's and Q's right straight away. She called Dean Graybill, the head daddy rabbit of Old Dominion Power. Dean, I need a tree down here this afternoon. I want it to be 50 foot tall. I've already got the steel drum for you to set it in. The original pine, ODP cut and tied the Christmas tree, lashed it to a pole. We had to water it. After it got so dry, the first year it made it through 9 performances all right. Next year we had to get a new tree. We get the boom truck in there and spray it green. We go down to Master's farm and cut trees and lash them to the flats, keep them green as long as they could, and painted them. Doc Botts and a bunch of them painted the backdrop. That was all in that 30-day period too. The camaraderie, it all became family. The mama. That we'd gather in, much like you all do today, look after one another, bring some of the most wonderful potluck meals. Did the makeup down here in the basement. And if it was held up by rain or something, Tommy would lead us in singing, Good Night, Irene. Anybody remember singing Good Night, Irene? Yeah. LaRue Bobich, hairdresser. She did the makeup. It's come a long way, people. A long way. From those chairs and pop bottle crates, in between the times, we had those lawn chairs. We were talking about that. First year they did all right. Second year you had to re-web them. Not fun. And then 77, decided to get rid of the lawn chairs and we built the benches. There's 3 benches left still out here from that time. Heavy old things. We spent days down here putting them together. They weren't too comfortable, especially after they got wet. Old wet soaked wood. Got rid of the wooden stage a few years. Second year, we had so much trouble with the wooden stage, everybody clomping across it. Thump, 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 thump. Brownie Polly Sr. came up with the idea of putting conveyor belt on it. Rubber, muffle that noise. Well, it did until it rained. Here comes Dave. There slid Dave right off the edge of the stage. Old Hoss, Slimp, he got out here and do the buck and wing dancing for homecoming. And he couldn't dance on that rubber. Had to drag out a sheet of plywood for him. He danced on that. Tommy blowing his feet cooler. Oh, Lord, honey. There's so many memories. I look at the trees. Some of these, Brownie Polly Sr. and I went up in the woods and pulled them up bare root. They wasn't yay high. Then when we filled it with dirt, ripped up the wood, it about pushed the backdrop over. Nobody thought about putting up a retaining wall. And those old cribs that's holding that backdrop up, don't look at them. They're tilted, they might. There's so many people. Another one I think of, Bill Crabtree. I learned more from that man than any other person in this world except my father. Be it good or be it bad. Right, Gordon? Lord, he was a genius on the verge of insanity. Really, he was working with hot box detectors. That's a thing on the railroad that if there was a journal on the box to get hot and start to catch on fire, heat sensors. And he was diddling around trying to use mirrors and that hot box detector to send sound waves. This is in the early 60s. But he was the electrician and the sound person. And had one of them souped up directors with a college education. He was trying to make shingles up here for the cabin. And he since years gone. And he was up all fretting over it and fretting over it. At that time, Bill was down here, the sound was down here in the orchestra pit. And he got tired of fussing with that. He came in here, went in the back, got in his truck and pulled out a chainsaw. Got him a carpenter's pencil and drew out what looked like shingles on a sheet of plywood. Took that chainsaw and cut just one layer of plywood. He said, get the garden hose and wet that down. 2 hours later, they had warped shingles. He said, now dry it up. He went back to Warren. Yeah, that orchestra pit, that brings back, the wall caved in on it, and they got it put back up. Arnie Riggs was helping Bill. Well, he thought he was helping. Arnie and Bill, they get in there, and Arnie'd wire up something, Bill wanted it another way. He was a genius with all of this electricity. Wires run everywhere. He could do about anything, and he was a wonderful musician. So many of the musicians are gone. Well, that first year, that just reminded me when I said musician. And Gilly, where are you? She's got hers with her. Our reward for participating in the show, they gave us a little charm bracelet, about the size of a dime, not nearly as thick. Trail of the Lonesome Pine, 1964. I don't know where mine is. I got it somewhere. Ann's got a hold of hers. Susie, I think you said you had yours somewhere. That fall, after the first season, Mr. Sturgill had been playing music up here. He passed away. And I remember going to the funeral home. A charm bracelet was pinned on his lapel. That did so much for me. It was a sign how much all this meant to people. It was just an awakening, and how much it's meant to all the people that come hereafter. These programs that's up here posted on the wall and the dog run, that doesn't tell you all the people that was in it. A lot of them couldn't be here the day they took pictures for that. And I dare say, if you counted them all up, it'd be well over 4,500, maybe 5,000 people. That's a lot of folks. That many of them, in one way or another, went on and had a career from a seed that was planted here. And that, to me, is the greatest legacy, to giving the young folks a stage or an opportunity to build self-confidence and assuredness that can carry them through a lifetime. I was scared to death to come out here. They couldn't get me to speak up. I learned I was speaking loud enough when I could hear my echo off the side of the Tolliver house. And it still bothers me today to get up and do public speaking. I don't feel uncomfortable here because I believe in it. That helps a lot, to believe in something. Makes a medicine go down a whole lot easier. Somebody asked me today to inform the folks about the real characters, what little I know of them. And this is especially true for the performers. I always wondered when I was doing Devil Judd, what would Devil John Wright think about all this? You know, he lived until 1938. He saw or knew about the book. We had a reunion of his descendants. Had 34 children, 5 wives. All of them lived within a half a day's ride of one another. Oh my, that's such a bore. May have been, keep in mind this is after the Civil War. And these widowed women with children needed somebody that could take care of them. He could sure take care of them. Credit to killing 7 men, never once drew first. If anybody been up in Kentucky, you hear about the Mayo Trail. John C.C. Mayo. He went around buying up mineral rights on this property all up and down to Big Sandy. And he needed a persuader. That was Devil John. Being a good shot, he joined a circus with his cousin, Martin Van Buren Bates, out of Letcher County, referred to as the Kentucky Giant, for he was 7 foot 9 inches tall, weighed 475 pounds. The two of them toured Asia and Europe together with the circus. Bates met a girl from Canada, met her in Norway, and she was taller than him. She was 8 foot 1. Queen Victoria personally gave them pocket watches for a wedding present. They moved back to Kentucky. There's a monument of him. He and Devil John, like I say, they were cousins. John, for whatever reason, was a friend of Tall Hall. What we know of is Bad Ruth. Now, I have not ever heard of a redeeming word for Tall Hall. Nothing. Nothing. He was asking a question of this young couple where somebody was, and he could tell that the young man with him was kind of mealy mouthed and didn't want to tell him. Blew his head off. They were after him for whatever murder of the time. 45 men in the posse went with him, went after him. They found out that he and Devil John were together. 42 turned back, the other 3 were never heard from. Now, Devil John, buried up in the pound, he was the law. Maybe not the law that the book said, but what he said went. He was baptized in 1928 up in Bowl Camp, a place called Fairview. 3,000 people came to see him being baptized. They didn't believe it. I've seen pictures of the baptism. Then Red Fox, Dr. C.M. Taylor. I don't know if any of you this first time for your show. It may be a spoiler alert. He did preach his own funeral. He did wear the heels on the front of his shoes, and his horse had one white stocking. He always carried a white rag and a brown rag to swap the stockings out. A lot of times he'd drag brush behind the horse to cover the trail. And he'd get mad at somebody, he'd go start on a rumor about him down to the neighbor, get a feud start and kill each other off. He was a minister, a doctor, revenuer, run liquor. He did it all. He had some formal medical training. When we first started, Pappy was interviewing people that really knew him. They were children as Red was still around. One feller, old timer, said, I remember him well. He came to the house. My grandmother was sick, and he said, gather together all the plow points and the metal you can find her and give her the broth off of it. She was anemic. Another story that you won't hear here. He was eating at this lady's house. Man knocked on the door. Doc, you got to come save my little girl. She's a dying. You can save her. You go on back up there. I'll be up there as soon as I get through eating. The guy walked out the door. That kid ain't sick. If he was sick, he'd waited until I got up and went with him. He went out to the shed, got up an old push plow, turned it upside down and hung a lantern off of it. Pushed it up a trail ahead of him. They shot the lantern. He killed both of them. He and Tall Hall didn't get along. They were in the jail for the murder. Red Fox killed Bad Ira Mullins. Oh, that reminds me. Bad Ira Mullins was running liquor back and forth across the Kentucky line. He was over the whole liquor. They called it the Mud Hole Gang. Well, Bad Ira had been shot in the neck and was paralyzed, and they got him around in a wagon. And they ambushed him at Killing Rock. There were 4 of them killed. About 4 years ago, Patty Cornett saw me and said, what do you know about Killing Rock? I said, I don't know, a little bit about what happened up there. Leanza Cornett was from Big Stone Gap. She was Miss America in the early 90s. She said, did you ever wonder how Leanza got her name? I said, I had no idea. First time Leanza I ever heard of. She was named for her great-great-grandmother, Leanza Mullins, Bad Ira's wife that was killed at the Killing Rock. That just blew me away, how all of these stories come back to today. Red Fox did wear white when they hanged him. He preached his own funeral for 2.5 hours, and he did take the sacrament. But he was hung in enclosed gallows. Only time I ever heard of enclosed gallows, for it was always other times out in the open, be good or thus unto you. Curious. I don't think he was hanged. I can't prove it. I think he drew the short straw to eliminate the problem of bad aura. And that's up to the rest of history, as far as I know. Young Dave was a composite. John Fox threw him in there. But then we get down to June. There's a family up in Keokee. Pearl Morris, true mountain man. He showed these engineers how to find the coal. It was said that he could smell the outcropping and could tell by the vegetation where the outcropping of the coal was. One of the engineers by the name of Jimmy Hodge got to be with him, met his daughter. Help me out, Paxton. Her first name. Lillian, or Elizabeth Morris. That he thought she was pretty sharp and deserved a better lot in life, so with Pearl's permission, he brought her down here to go to school. She stayed 6 months and went back home. She was homesick. But that was what John Fox took to become June, that little story. That she was still living when we did the first show, but she was not in health enough to join us from Florida. And then Pearl, he taught Brownie Polly Sr. a lot about this coal mining. He took him throughout the mountains and showed him where it was. And on a personal level, my grandmother in Exeter was sweeping the porch one day, and Pearl came by, holding his side. Good morning, Miss Jessie. Good morning, Pearl. Later that day, she found out the reason he was holding his side, he'd been stabbed that night. Tough old bird. These characters, I think in many ways, are more than the story and how he wove it all together. That was in 1908. People thought that this place was nuts trying to do something like this. Somebody asked old man Esbury, he said, what's going on down there? Lordy, I don't know. That woman, that Miss Kelly, she had a bunch of them in here. They were talking about doing something down there, but I never could make much of it. They was singing the other night. To think how far it's come today and how much this has meant to so many people. This lady right here took the thread and sewed all these pieces together. And I applaud the people that's doing this today, keeping this project alive. For it has meant so much, not only to the region, but our whole country through here, and so many lives. The fact that this drama came about proved that a community could work together. And it led to the building of Mountain Empire College. It led to getting the Lonesome Pine Hospital built. The cooperation and loving your neighbor. We had a lot of talent. We still got a lot of talent. New generation. I wanted to tell this story, not for my benefit, but for those in the wings right now, so they can carry on with a sense of heritage. Bless your hearts and all your vital organs.